On November the 19th, 2010, a large methane gas explosion ripped through the Pike River coal mine, permanently trapping 29 men more than 2 kilometers inside. In the month leading up to the accident, management ignored 21 reports of methane gas reaching explosive levels and 12 instances of friction flame ignition. Despite being New Zealand's newest and largest underground mine, it had virtually no effective ventilation management and only one working gas sensor. This is the story of the Pike River Mine Disaster. The Pike River coalfields were first discovered in 1946. The coal seam itself runs along the eastern crest of the Paparoa mountain range, located on the west coast of New Zealand's South Island. In 1979, geologists began a detailed survey of the area. 6 drill holes deep inside the mountain confirmed the presence of large quantities of high-grade coal, and the Pike River Coal Company was formed. However, the low price of coal at the time meant there was, for the time being, very little interest in the cost of the initial construction, and further development went on hold. By the early 2000s, the price of coal was skyrocketing and more than 2 million tonnes were being exported from the West Coast coalfields each year. For the Pike River Coal Company, the time was right to build their mine. The Pike River Mine Disaster was brought about by an astonishing degree of incompetence, negligence, and general disregard for safety, from its original construction all the way to its tragic final day of operation. To understand how such third world standards played out in a modern first world country, one must look back almost 2 decades before the mine was built. Before 1993, all mining operations had to comply with the Coal Mines Act of 1979, a very specific and direct set of guidelines written in the blood of the 182 lives lost in New Zealand's 8 previous mine explosions, the last of which was in 1967. The Act saw the Mines Inspectorate play a pivotal oversight in the life of a mine, from its construction to annual inspections all the way to its closure. However, with the new deregulation, in essence, the government relied on the mine's operators to follow best industry practices with now minimal regulatory oversight. In 2004, the Pike River Coal Company received its final approvals for the construction of the mine. Despite its name, however, the company was merely a board of directors with no actual experience in mining. The initial plan was to develop the mine in partnership with an experienced company, but everyone they approached considered it too risky, so the decision was made to do it themselves. Peter Whittle, a mining engineer with more than 24 years' experience in the Australian mining industry, was appointed technical manager in 2005. Starting with an empty office, he had the task of designing and overseeing the construction of the mine. Speaking to a mining conference in 2006, Whittle bravely cast the company's lack of experience as an advantage. Pike will not have the shackles of past operational and management errors at the mine. It has a clean sheet to plan, design, construct, and operate the mine with state-of-the-art technical and management systems. Needless to say, the statement wouldn't age well. The first step was the construction of the 11-kilometre access road traversing the steep bush-covered hillside. From there, through the solid rock, they'd drive a tunnel 2.3 kilometres on a 5-degree incline until crossing the Hawera fault line and penetrating the main coal seam, where the workings of the mine could finally be built. Although construction of the access road went smoothly, digging the tunnel, or the drift, was an entirely different story. Based on the company's poor geological research before construction, they had assumed, falsely, they'd be digging through solid rock requiring minimal support, when in actual fact, more than 80% of the tunnel went through broken rock, requiring concrete and bolted mesh coverings. The tunnel took twice as long to build and double the amount budgeted for. While cost overruns might seem like small change to a multi-million-dollar mining operation, it's important to note that the Pike River Coal Company had no other source of revenue and relied solely on investors' money. One of the biggest dangers in underground coal mining is the release of methane gas. Released during the process of coal extraction, methane gas is highly explosive when between the ranges of 5 and 15%. Below or above this, it's non-explosive. As a safety measure in most mining operations, if gas levels reach 1.25%, all machinery must stop, and at 2%, workers will evacuate the mine. To mitigate the dangers posed by methane gas, ventilation is used. One of the more alarming aspects of the Pike River mine was there would be only one entry and one exit, more than 2 kilometers or 1.2 miles from where the men would work. This would be illegal in most other developed countries. Having only one exit created another massive problem for the Pike River mine: no natural ventilation, a significant issue in an already gassy mine. The attempted solution to this problem was to install a large ventilation shaft near the main workings at the opposite end to the entrance. However, in all their wisdom, they installed the ventilation shaft in an earthquake fault line, resulting in it collapsing not long after construction, adding additional time and cost pressures. The company decided to abandon the collapsed ventilation shaft and construct a new one. This time, however, with the extraction fan at the base of the shaft. This was not standard industry practice, as it would make it more vulnerable to fire or even explosion. In October of 2008, the Pike River mining operation was finally open, albeit well behind schedule and massively over budget. The mine was hampered by ongoing issues right from the start, from constant equipment breakdowns to continuous warnings about methane gas levels. While management dealt with high staff overturn, cost overruns and pressure from investors, mounting piles of hazard reports regarding high gas readings and ventilation issues were largely ignored. By 2010, the company, under considerable financial pressure, sought to raise more finance from its investors. While the financial side of the operation wasn't great, the physical shape of the mine was even worse. The methane gas problem had become so bad at the mine that shift supervisors were threatening to go to the Department of Labor if their concerns were not heard. This incident report, submitted by shift supervisor Dean Murphy in 2010, highlights the drastic concerns of the men down in the mine. The report highlights inadequate ventilation, fire and explosion hazard, safety rules not enforced, and poor leadership, among other things, even going so far as to give management 4 days to respond, or he'd send a formal complaint to the mines inspectorate. However, despite constant reports, no definitive corrective action was ever taken. In fact, in the final month of the mine's operation, management received 21 reports of methane gas reaching explosive levels and 12 instances of sparks causing minor ignitions, all of which were ignored. According to Colin Smith, chairman of the Pike River Families Group Committee and the Pike River 29 Legacy Trust, management was so overwhelmed with incident reports that, in the 2 weeks before the explosion, in order to clear the backlog, they wrote them all off without even reading them. There was one other damning piece of information that would come to light later. Of the mere 4 gas sensors in the mine, only one of them was working in the week before the explosion. On Friday, the 19th of November 2010, 31 men were hard at work deep inside the mine. As on any given workday, men entered and left the mine at different times. Chance would play its part in deciding who would pay the price for the crimes of those above them. At around 3:44 PM, a large methane gas explosion ripped through the main workings of the mine, instantly cutting off all power and communications to the outside world. The force of the explosion is demonstrated in the CCTV footage from the entrance, at least 2.3 kilometers or 1.4 miles from the epicenter. Two men who, as luck would have it, had been further down the drift at the moment of explosion, both suffering the effects of carbon monoxide poisoning, managed to escape the mine. The news of the explosion was devastating for the small west coast town of Greymouth. Everybody knew somebody affected. The New Zealand police force was tasked with the emergency response, assisted by the New Zealand Mines Rescue Team and other experts flown in from Australia. The lack of real-time gas sensors within the mine meant that police had no information regarding the underground conditions, and all attempts at communication with the miners were going unanswered. Police and other experts were hesitant to send in search and rescue teams for fear of another explosion. On the 24th of November, 5 days following the disaster, those fears were realised. At 2:37 PM, a second devastating explosion again ripped through the mine, ending any last hope of survivors. There would be a third and fourth explosion in the days that followed. On the 29th of November, New Zealand Prime Minister John Key announced a Royal Commission of Inquiry into the circumstances that led to the tragedy. The final report, released in November the following year, highlighted widespread systemic problems within the New Zealand mining industry, specifically inadequate regulatory oversight leading to gross violations of health and safety practices at the Pike River Mine by its management, the details of which have been highlighted in this video. In April of 2013, the Pike River Coal Company, after not bothering to attend the hearing, was found guilty of 9 health and safety breaches in order to pay $760,000 in fines, plus $3.4 million to the families of the victims. By this time, however, the company had gone bankrupt and couldn't pay the fine, nor the compensation. In addition to those laid upon the Pike River Coal Company, 12 separate criminal charges of various crimes were filed against the company's former chief executive, Peter Whittle. In October of that same year, Whittle's lawyer wrote secretly to the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, suggesting that, in advance of $3.41 million being made available to pay the families, it is proposed, with precise terms to be agreed, that the ministry will not proceed with the charges laid against Mr. Whittle. On the 12th of December, Judge Jane Farish, on order, dropped all charges against Peter Whittle, saying, "Some people may believe this is Mr. Whittle buying his way out of a prosecution, but I can tell you, it's not." It's worth noting that in 2017, the New Zealand Supreme Court ruled that the deal was unlawful because it prevented a prosecution. At the time of making this video, 11 years after the disaster, no one has yet been held accountable for the blatant violations leading to the tragedy, and the bodies of the 29 miners are still yet to be recovered. With access into the mine still considered too dangerous, the precise location and ignition source of the explosion remains a mystery, and without doubt, the freedoms of some individuals may rely on it remaining a mystery.